Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of unexpected timbres. When you're listening to a song that kind of familiar with the general sound or genre of it, and then an instrument pops up and you're like, wow, never expected to hear that in this genre or from this artist. Today we're going to be looking at some Danny Brown. I don't think I've listened to anything from Danny Brown in the past, so I don't really have much of a context for what might be unexpected in here, but let's dive into the track Starburst and see what Danny's bringing to the table today.
Check. Better shape up and get them squares about your circle. If all these niggas bosses, then tell me who the workers. Cause these niggas lurking, pull up like leaving herders. They talk about the murder till they right behind them hearses. Presence is the past in a second, so count your blessings. The lesson is the essence, that's natural adolescent. They woke me up inside like listen to Evanescence. Was microphone checking at 7, no half stepping. Caught the weapon on the reverend.
He said it woke me up inside like listening to Evanescence.
I'm sending this ass to heaven. They woke up the monster, so I divide and conquer. I ponder going bonkers, then knocking out your chompers. I wonder why they slumber when they stay in front of honor. But when they in them streets, they going nuts like conquer. Big guy, dropping them small fries like a lunch rush came in and everybody caught in. These niggas want the smoke like 20 twin. Used to get hit with bricks like Debo at the end. If getting money a sin, I'm going straight to hell. I sold all my shares, that's why your stock fell. Well, I'm leaving them all pale. Snatch a rapper so now he a shell of himself. I'm lifting all them curses with what I do with them verses. Got up the underground.
So we removed a lot of the bass sound for contrast and then bring it back in here.
Surrounded by flounder. Out here in them streets, keep them niggas from round you. They purpose is a circus and these niggas a clown you. A minstrel with the pencil, a bird in the instrumental. I put it to your temple, then turn a nigga to lentil. And Bruno Mogley shoes, I'm leaving tracks of rental.
Kind of been
Accentuate utensils, I'm chopping them with the Gensu.
And then when it comes back in, you kind of get that drop. What is this melody instrument? It's got reverb. Okay, that's just the fat synth. I got that one. I don't know. I mean, I guess the last one was also a synth.
Remarkable niggas is just a sparkle. To nuclear, I'm tubular, right with permanent markers. The only thing erases your face if you try to pop up. I'm locking up the game like punishment from your mama. Trauma I went through just made me stronger than ever. So I would never let up. You niggas ain't on my level. In a whole nother league, fatigue up in your setup. Punchlines weak like putting water in ketchup. Wrapped up on them and left with stolen moments. You a snapshot photographer in the coma. I rain like Tacoma. They sleeping like they on Soma. So when I get up on them, I'm still ain't shit like Winona. Who the fuck you niggas think you're fucking with? I'm standing on business and you niggas on some sucker shit. Coming from the city where we do it for the love of it. So I show no pity for a cloud chasing sucker.
More unsettling here. The vocal line in the background was leaning into a bit of tension. Really interesting rhythmic phrasing on that. I mean, the last little intersection had some interesting rhythmic timing to it too. With all the rising energy, the pitch coming up, the volume and layers increasing, I really thought we were going to have a drop.
Drunk with stardust. When you were lasered into life in a beautifully precise manner, you clocked that which you'd never see, the minutiae of the world's beauty. You noticed how the guy across from you on the train put way too much aquaphor on his lips. When you were at your most stable, you quickly exploded. When you're infected with its dust, you hear that which no one else hears. Peaking on stardust, we chase silence out of our world till Gabriel blew his horn. You resign yourself to delinquency, quirkifying your life. Like a vegetarian with a carnivore spirit, you stabbed at the fauna of the world, hunted it, surveying life's riches.
So I'll be honest, I thought the unexpected timbre was actually Danny's voice. I don't think I've listened to a lot of rap with that sort of pitched up, almost nasally sound. Maybe it's an effect he's putting on for himself, just really pushing up there into that nasally sounds, or maybe that's just the way his voice is. Either way, that was a bit unexpected for me, at least, not really knowing who Danny Brown is, what kind of music they make. But there at the end, I think it was actually the spoken word that's the unexpected part. There's also quite a bit of instrumental work in here, which I don't expect from hip hop either. Hip hop to me is a very lyrically driven genre. And for sure, the first 4 minutes of this track are incredibly dense. Layers upon layers of lyrics being thrown into the audience's ear. I'm apprehensive about getting to the lyrical dive because I know it's going to be a novella of words to get through and try to understand and digest. But there's also instrumental parts in here too. Granted, the first two of them I don't think does much. It primarily uses the synth lines and drum parts that we already have from the verse and possibly a chorus. I don't know if there really is that, but there is a push and pull musically to this track. We just use the same stuff that we've been listening to, just don't have lyrics on top of it. But around the 4-minute mark, we begin to experiment with sound, timbre, melodies, rhythms. We introduce these underneath vocals, but there's also a solid 30 or 40 seconds of just instrumental work. In fact, the one part almost sounded like we were getting into dance music ideas, with this rising idea, layering up, volume coming up, pitch coming up, seeming like it was going to move towards a very typical dance drop. And it doesn't do that, but then we do continue to explore purely instrumental sound after that too, something a bit lower in energy. I think it's interesting listening to the more minimalistic composition at the beginning of this track that is primarily a synth and a drum beat, and then occasionally some ornamental ideas off to the side. There is a bass tone in there too, but I don't know, it gets kind of lost in a lot of the percussive sound. They're sharing a lot of composition there. And so I kind of lost the timbre of that, and just the bassiness became part of the bass kick of the drums. But it's very minimal compositionally. Of course, it's there to set the atmosphere and allow the vocals to be there on top of that. But as we get further into the track, we begin to see more layered writing. And I think it's not just that we have this rising energy that seemingly would normally go into a drop, but it's also the amounts of layers here. It's the types of sounds used. It's the type of writing used as well. It differentiates itself from the more hip-hop oriented writing that we see in the first 3 minutes of the track. And I think it's really interesting how there's a subtle change around the 2.5, 3 minute mark. I think it's the third verse of the track where we get a brand new musical idea underneath the vocals. It is this subtle introduction that we are shifting away from a hip-hop centric compositional style into an electronic one. And then, of course, the rapped vocals go away and we get pure instrumental stuff for a bit. This leads into a constantly evolving electronic sound sphere that is designed to house the spoken word poetry at the end of the track. It's an interesting evolution of ideas here, and I think if we didn't have the final minute or so of this song, I wouldn't really have much to say about this track, but it really is the back half of this song that, I don't know, it alters my expectations. Or I suppose it defies my expectations, altering the track in more interesting ways. I think ultimately there's still not a lot to talk about, but because it is different from the norm, it does break my expectations. That certainly makes it worth bringing up, worth discussing. And when we talk about the instrumentation, the drum beat, it's pretty straightforward. There's a general pulse in there, an accented cadence to give you the groove of the song, and that's pretty static. The first 2.5 minutes or so, it's got one beat to it. We do get a new beat around the time we enter the third verse, but if there is a chorus in here, the drum beat doesn't change much for it. The same goes for that interesting instrument at the beginning, which I still think is probably some sort of modified synth, but it is odd and very metamorphical. That's not a word. Don't use that in front of people. I'm making stuff up over here. But it does alter and shift. There's not really a strong sense of staccato movement where I can say, oh, this was this note, and then it went to this note. It sort of just morphs into new pitches. Even from the start, I suppose, they're playing around with the ideas of transformation. Regardless, this is it. Like I said, there's a bass tone underneath too, but these three instruments are pretty much it for the first half of this track. The atmosphere they're creating is one of tension, but I think that primarily comes from production. And for me, it's the synth. The tone is interesting. It has a lot of microtonality to it because of the smooth movement between pitches. And it just kind of comes off as amorphous. It is there. There are defined pitches that it eventually lands on, and that will give us the chordal information. But because of the smooth movement between them, because of the heavy use of microtones, it's kind of lacking strong harmonic information. It doesn't really have a harmonic body to it. It feels like I'm looking at something that has no shape or form, but it does. Like I said, if you're paying attention to the downbeats, the notes on the downbeats are one of the 12 pitches in Western 12-tone intonation. There is a chord progression if you pay attention to those. There is form to this. But moment to moment, most of what you're hearing is microtonality. It's formless, and it's this duality of something that is and isn't simultaneously. It puts me on edge because it's difficult to figure out what it is. I don't know if there's a good visual analogy for this, but I'm sure there's some sci-fi or horror film that has tackled something along these lines of something that is constantly and simultaneously familiar and unfamiliar. But it does put me at unease through a lot of this. I do find the vocals, though, to kind of be a bit calming and almost distracting, too, given that there's so much of them. There's the constant cadence shifts. There's the little vocal elements, too, rising in pitch, lowering in pitch, accented notes or syllables and stuff that's a bit more smoother going through. There's a lot of charisma to the delivery as well, and I found that I was frequently brought back to the vocals. Anytime I drift off, hey, what's that synth doing over there? And then the vocalist will say something interesting, whether it'll be sonically interesting or language interesting, like actually saying something cool. Like I picked up on that line, I think, where he said something about being woken up like I'm listening to Evanescence. Which is just, I really hope that's the right line, because that is a great bar. It's kind of dumb and silly, but I mean it works. I think it gets its idea conveyed well. There's always something that grabbed me back to the vocals, though. So as uneasy as I think the synth kind of makes me, the groove and the general cadence and delivery of the vocals constantly bring me back into something a bit more familiar and comfortable. That does take us, though, to the end of the track, though, which I found to be kind of haunting. Not so much because of timbre anymore, though, but because of composition. The notes chosen here, primarily on the choir-esque vocals in the background. The note choices there, alongside the harmonic elements of this track, of this section, they're unsettling. There's a darkness to all of this, a creeping element to it. I don't know what was said there in the vocals, in the spoken word part, primarily because it's sort of the inverse here, where the vocals are the least interesting part of this section. I'm not saying that the lyrics aren't interesting, but the delivery isn't. It's just someone talking. There is a little bit of attention, I think, paid to delivery, cadence, emphasized syllables, but unlike rap, which really focuses on the musicality of speech, this focuses more on a poetic delivery. There is a general rhythm through it, but it isn't necessarily done in a musical way. And so, inversely, where I said the music is rather simple at the beginning of the track, we are actually seeing a bunch of layers here. We're seeing interesting harmonic ideas. We're hearing melodic concepts. There's just musically more going on here than what's going on in the vocals. And I find this to be a really interesting idea too, because it comes after the instrumental part of the song, where the song has kind of flipped itself over. My expectations for hip hop is light music, vocal emphasis, no instrumental bits. And here we have a pretty lengthy instrumental bit that goes into a section that emphasizes the music. The music, though, like I said, takes on something a bit more dark, eerie, haunting. I'm curious what all this is supposed to represent. I don't know, Starburst doesn't really mean much to me as a word, so I don't know that I have anything else to add to the musical side of this either. It's a very interesting track, though, and makes me want to dig more into Danny Brown from a purely musical standpoint, simply because I found this to sort of, like I said, break my expectations for what hip-hop does, while also being interesting, too, on its own, aside from the sort of expectation breaking, the novelty of that. There's still some solid ideas in here, and a general narrative that the music is conveying. Let's hit some lyrics. All right. Anyone who's a bit more well-versed with hip-hop culture and terminology, let me know if there's a proper term for this, but to me, this is a song that follows in a long tradition of hip-hop tracks of just talking oneself up. I don't know if there's a proper term for that type of lyrical style, the story being told here, but this entire song basically says, I'm one of the best out there, and everyone else is just floundering about trying to catch up to me. We have lines like, they woke up the monster, so I divide and conquer. I ponder before going bonkers and knocking out your chompers. I wonder why they somber when they stand in front your honor. But when they in them streets, they going nuts like conquer. So we have this idea here that there's a monster inside and it's willing to do whatever it needs. He even says at one point, I wonder if I should just go crazy and then punch you right in the teeth. It's just straightforward. But he also states that there's nothing stopping him from getting big, too. At one point saying he was microphone checking at 7, no half stepping. I'll pull a weapon on the reverend and tell him to run the collection. If he hesitate a second, I'm sending his ass to heaven. The idea that even at the age of 7, he was already hustling for his art. He was already on microphones, already doing freestyle or whatever, trying to get his name out there as a rapper. And he says that he would even pull a weapon on a reverend and tell him to run the collection. He would even take money from a church. There's nothing that's going to stop him from being the top of his game, being rich, being big and famous. Most of the rest of it is about everyone else just not being at his level. Says at one point, I'm locking up the game like punishment from your mama, which I really like that idea. Locking up the game is just being so good that you have the game, which is the rap scene, on lockdown. But also, most of us, I don't know how old he is, but at least me as a 90s kid, one of the worst things that could happen is my mom taking away the video games. Taking the Sega Genesis or the Game Boys and locking them up in the closet. So he says, I'm locking up the game like punishment from your mama. Says, trauma I went through made me stronger, so I would never let up, and y'all ain't on my level. I'm in a whole nother league. He says, your punchlines are weak like putting water in ketchup. So talking about y'all are watering everything down. You think you're big, but you're not. So that is the 3 verses of this, is Danny just talking himself up, saying he's one of the best. No one can catch up to him. But then we get to the outro, a spoken word bit. And this is delivered by Angel Emoji. I'm just going to read this whole thing out because I find a lot of it to be evocative, but I'm not sure what it's saying. It's one of those things where you kind of get this gut feeling about the artistic side of it, even though linguistically it's kind of falling on you empty. The words themselves aren't meaning anything, but you're feeling something out of it. Words kind of fail to describe this. It says, drunk with stardust. When you were lasered into life in a beautifully precise manner, you clocked that which you would never see, the minutiae of the world's beauty. You noticed how the guy across from you on the train put way too much aquaphor on his lips. When you were at the most stable, you quickly exploded. When you're infected with its dust, you hear that which no one else hears. Peaking on stardust, we chase silence out of our world till Gabriel blew his horn. You resign yourself to delinquency, quirkify your life. Like a vegetarian with a carnivore spirit, you stabbed at the fauna of the world and hunted it, surveying life's riches. So we have a concept here of chasing something that you only got to see for a fragment of a moment, presumably at your birth, before you could understand anything. It says you were lasered into life and clocked the minutiae of world's beauty, something you would never see again. It says at the moment when your eyes first open, you are presented with the beauty of life. And from that moment, you will never see that beauty again. Life will become ugly. It will become depressing. Nothing after that moment is as good. You start at the peak, and the entire life is a roller coaster ride down. But then it goes on to say stuff. I don't know what the rest of this means. She talks about being exploding after being stable and being infected with the dust and peaking on stardust. I don't know if this is a drug metaphor or, stardust is also an idea of where we come from, the energies of the cosmos. Is this just talking about being filled with life? I don't know. But at the end it says, we resign to delinquency, quirkifying our life. And I think this is interesting. Delinquency. Not following orders, not following the way things should be. It says we quirkify our life. We hunt the fauna of the world and survey life's riches. But is there an idea there that we don't want to? Because it states like a vegetarian with the carnivore spirit, we stab the fauna of the world and survey life's riches. So it would emphasize the fact that we do this despite not wanting to. So we're forced to be violent in this world, which I can kind of get behind, possibly. But I don't know, dude. Everything up to this point is pretty clear cut. There's some good metaphor. I think Danny has a good way with words, double entendre, and figurative language, but is pretty straightforward in the message. Then we get to Angel Emoji, though, and it's complex, complicated. What does this mean? At one point, I skipped this because I have no idea what it has to do with anything. It says, you notice the guy across from you on the train put way too much Okafor on his lips. What? Why? What does this mean? I don't know, dude. I'm so lost on this conclusion. I suppose this is where I'm going to turn the microphone over, though. What do y'all get out of this? These are just my thoughts on Danny Brown's Stardust. Would you like to add on to stuff I said, or correct me on in places I was wrong? Or if you have your own interpretation of things, and specifically this final stanza, if it means something to you, please let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.